Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, we're getting into something really fundamental for any business that wants to last. It's this idea of trust equity.
Right. It's like saying the trust a company builds isn't just fluff. It's almost like capital, as important as market value, maybe more in the long run.
Exactly. And that brings up a huge challenge for business owners, doesn't it? How do you keep investors happy, keep growing, but not drift away from why you started the whole thing?
Yeah.
Your vision, your values.
That's the core tension, yeah. Balancing that shareholder value demand with preserving the original soul of the company, it's tricky.
So that's our mission for this deep dive. We're asking, how can businesses actually grow the bottom line while protecting those founding principles, that legacy? We've looked at some articles talking about trust, value, purpose.
And we want to sort of weave these threads together, see how you can strategically manage value creation so it supports, not undermines, your long-term mission and legacy.
Okay, let's start digging in. First stop, trust. It feels like it goes beyond just the balance sheet.
Oh, absolutely. We saw this piece talking about trust equity, arguing that shareholder value it's way more than just profit numbers.
How so?
Well, think about who you need trust with. Your shareholders, yes, obviously, but also your employees doing the work, your customers buying the stuff, even the community you operate in.
Right. All those relationships.
Exactly. The trust you build or erode with all of them, that directly shapes your reputation, your resilience. It's like an invisible asset.
And there's evidence for this, right? It's
Yep.
not just a nice idea.
Definitely. We saw some research, I think, from the World Economic Forum basically saying companies that actively work on building trust across all these groups, they just perform better overall, better business results.
So it connects directly to success.
Yeah, and think about what that trust does. Another perspective, I think it was Deloitte, talked about how it helps companies, ride out rough patches.
Like a buffer.
Exactly. A shock absorber. Plus, it helps you get and keep good people who actually believe in what you're doing and builds that deep customer loyalty.
It's not just about being like the good guys. It actually fuels growth.
It really does. Faster growth, stronger relationships. So for you listening, if you're thinking about the long-term health of your business, the loyalty factor, this reframes it, doesn't it? Trust isn't peripheral, it's central.
Okay, so if trust is that crucial, how do businesses actually manage it alongside the constant pressure for financial results?
Yeah.
How do you protect the legacy while delivering value?
Well, that brings us to some strategies. There was an interesting piece, Harvard Business Review, I think, on managing for shareholder value.
Right, I saw that. It talked about shareholder value analysis.
Yeah, basically a way to look at decisions not just for the next quarter's results, but for their long-term impact on the company's overall worth.
Seeing the bigger picture.
Precisely. It's
Yeah.
about making conscious choices. Sometimes you face a trade-off between a quick financial win and something that protects your long-term goals or your legacy.
And sacrificing the long term for the short term can be risky.
Hugely risky. You could undermine everything you've built. So this analysis helps you weigh those things more strategically.
And how does trust fit into making those decisions? We talked about involving stakeholders earlier.
Right, that came up again. The idea was if you create clear guidelines for how you operate and you actually involve different groups, employees, maybe even community reps in key decisions.
People feel included.
Exactly. It builds massive trust. When people understand the why behind decisions, even tough ones, and feel their perspective was considered, they're more likely to stay committed.
And that shared commitment helps uphold the values.
It becomes a safeguard for the legacy, yeah.
Yeah.
And transparency is key here, too. You have to communicate openly.
That World Economic Forum piece mentioned that too, open communication, making trust building an ongoing thing.
Always. It's not a set it and forget it deal. It's consistent action, consistent honesty. Another article, this one from BCG, really hammered this home.
What was their take?
They linked purpose, trust, and value, arguing that you need to be crystal clear on your company's core purpose, why you exist.
Beyond just making money.
Right. And then you have to actually deliver on the promises tied to that purpose consistently. And, crucially, find ways to measure if you're succeeding in building trust.
Measure trust. How?
Well, it could be surveys, feedback channels, just paying really close attention to morale, customer sentiment, things like that. But the point is, these aren't just, feel-good exercises.
They're strategic actions.
They directly build lasting value and protect that legacy you care about. So for anyone listening who wants their company to thrive and stay true to itself, these are practical ways to think about it.
It seems like that idea of purpose keeps coming up as foundational.
It really does. That BCG article strongly argued that a clear, powerful sense of purpose is the bedrock. You build trust on top of that purpose.
And the trust then drives the lasting value.
Exactly. It makes intuitive sense, right? If your company knows its why and acts with integrity to achieve it, stakeholders, employees, customers, they feel it. They trust you more deeply.
And that loops back to what we started with, trust equity.
Precisely. It shows it's not some separate thing you track over here while finance is over there. It's all interwoven. Purpose fuels trust. Trust underpins sustainable value, both financial and reputational.
Sometimes maybe even outweighing the pure financials when you look long term.
Often, I'd argue, a company with deep trust can weather storms that purely profit-driven ones might not survive.
It really makes you pause and think about, well, the soul of your own business. What is the driving force? And how does that connect to the legacy you want to leave?
Absolutely. Which leads us nicely into thinking about, okay, what are the practical steps? What can you, listening right now, actually do?
Yeah, let's get down to the actionable stuff. What are the takeaways here?
Okay, first off, it seems essential to actually define and, write down your core values. What are the absolute non-negotiables for how you operate?
Nailing down the fundamentals.
Right. Second, make a real conscious effort to listen. Actively listen to your stakeholders, employees, customers, partners. Understand what they care about, what their concerns are.
Don't just assume you know.
No. And third, transparency again. Be open about decisions, about performance, even when the news isn't great. That builds incredible trust over time.
Okay. Values, listening, transparency. What else?
Well, linked to listening is maybe setting up ways to actually monitor trust. Like we mentioned, maybe simple surveys, regular check-ins, tracking feedback trends, make it tangible.
So you know if you're moving the needle.
Exactly. And finally, embed that long-term perspective into all your decisions. Always ask, how does this affect our legacy? Does this short-term gain risk long-term trust?
Resisting that easy win if it compromises the future.
It's discipline. These aren't quick fixes, obviously. They're about embedding a different way of thinking into the business. But they're concrete ways to manage shareholder value with legacy in mind.
So bringing it all together then, the real takeaway feels like managing shareholder value effectively isn't just about the quarterly numbers. It's broader.
It has to be. It's a holistic approach. You're actively building trust. You're consciously protecting your legacy while you're pursuing financial success. They aren't separate goals.
They're integrated. One supports the other.
That's the idea. Recognizing that your financial health, the trust you command, and the lasting impact you have, they're all interconnected. Vital signs of a truly healthy, sustainable business.
Right. Okay, so as we wrap up, maybe a final thought for everyone listening to mull over.
Yeah.
Thinking about your own business, your own work. What is the single most important piece of its legacy, its core identity, that you absolutely want to ensure stays intact no matter how much you grow or how much value you create?
That's a powerful question. Really gets to the heart of it.
It does. Something to reflect on. We hope this deep dive gave you some useful ways to think about that connection between value, trust, and legacy in your own world.
Definitely food for thought. This is really just scratching the surface, of course.
Always more to explore. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.